Hey, what's up guys? RedBeard here from the Warrior Tribe. Week 2 challenge was to learn a new skill and teach it to the tribe. So I have a skill that I've just recently learned, which was making wine. That's what I do as a job, is I make wine. And but we don't do cider where I work. So I thought hard cider is something a lot of people are liking to get into, and the principle is pretty much the same as making wine with a few different tweaks. But I'll give you a little bit of a demonstration as to how to make your own hard cider. And this same concept works with mead. If you just want to mix honey and water and some aromatics, some different herbs or spices, you can make mead this exact same way as the hard cider. So we're going to start with 6 liters of pure apple cider, not pasteurized and no preservatives. If there's any preservatives in the cider, you won't get a fermentation. The yeast will die. So, and if you get something that's raw and unpasteurized, you can get a stronger, more fruitful apple taste, which is nice. So I'm going to start with these 6 liters. I'm going to pour them into this jar. Okay, this is a small carboy. It's an 11-liter carboy. The ones we use at work are about twice this size, a little bit more than twice this size. So today my fermentation is only going to go to about half of the carboy, which is fine. So I'll pour these in here, and then we'll go to the next step. Just open up the cider. Smells great. Let's dump it into this carboy. Not the biggest funnel in the world. I think that's not saving me any time. Let's do it this way. Yeah, that's better. Alright. Well, you get the idea. So once I've got all the cider into the carboy, I can go ahead and take my brewing yeast. There are 2 types of yeast you can use. One is brewer's yeast or winemaking yeast. Either one will work. This is champagne yeast, Lavalin EC1118. That's the one you want. So I could just tear this open. And if you don't know what yeast is, no, you can see it. It's just little tiny balls, and they're just little creatures, little bacteria that are in stasis. And when I put them in here, they'll wake up and they'll start eating the sugar. So let's go ahead and pour the yeast in. I don't know if we can get a good view. You can see it floating in the top there. And it'll do its thing, it'll come to life. And in time, this will start to come to life. The yeast will start to consume the sugars in the cider. And as the yeast eats up the sugars, they basically burp and fart and leave a nice amount of alcohol and CO2 for carbonation. So this will sit in here for about 2 weeks, and after that we'll go to the next step in racking it into a secondary fermentation. So now that we've got the yeast onto the cider, it's going to sit in here in its primary fermentation for about 2 weeks or so. And after that point, all the yeast that's been in there eating sugars and expelling alcohol and CO2 will have died off, and their bodies and all the sediment will be down at the bottom. So we will have to rack that into a secondary fermenter. So what I'll just need to do at that point is just do a straight up siphon from this carboy into this cider jug. This is an airlock bubbler, so this will go on top. It will prevent oxygen from escape or going into the cider, but it will allow the excess gas to escape. So that's important. It's just another pack of yeast here. This is called potassium metabisulfite. It's a type of salt. You add it into some water, and you can sterilize all your tools that you're working with when you're making your cider. Your hose, any stirring spoons. If you don't sterilize, you will end up with some bacteria in there, and you'll get mold, and you don't want any of that. So the glass carboys. They're also cleaned out with metabisulfite, rinsed out really well with water, and then ready to use. At this point, I'm going to add a little bit more of this sweet reserve. It's going to allow me to increase the alcohol content on this cider, maybe get the content up pretty strong. Because it'll only eat so much of that sugar, and then the cider will go completely dry tasting. So I'll save some of that sweet reserve and re-sweeten it near. So guys, that pretty much concludes the first stage of homemade cider making. Stay tuned in a couple weeks and we will continue the next step of stabilizing and racking, where we'll stop the alcohol from continuing to ferment, or the yeast from continuing to ferment, and stop the alcohol in its place. And then we can rack it over to our secondary container, and it can do its secondary fermentation for another 2 to 3 weeks, and it will settle out even more, and we can rack it a third time if we want it to be absolutely clear. It doesn't matter though, it can be cloudy, that's never a problem. So yeah, we'll see how this whole process will unroll as we go. So stay tuned for a couple weeks from now, guys, and we'll finish up the steps. Thanks for watching.